Hi, and welcome to Dutch the Podcast. My name is Mike, and right there is Tom Byfoot. He is the publisher of Dutch the Magazine and, of course, executive producer. I just added that to the list.
Great.
Of Dutch
promotion.
Yeah, well done, Tom. Congratulations.
Already, after a few podcasts. That's great.
That's how Hollywood works, Tom.
You're
that's here
wonderful.
Today, but hang on to that fleeting glory, okay?
Because it is fleeting, yeah.
But thank you very much for leading the way on this, Tom, as we head into everything Dutch with Dutch the Podcast. Today, as always, an amazing guest, and we'll get Tom to set us up with that. But I'll remind you to subscribe to the show wherever you're catching it right now, including on YouTube, where you can even give us a thumbs up if you like. And you can hit the notification button if you do that kindly. We'll let you know every time a new episode comes up. All right. Listen, before we go any further, coming up at the end of the show, we'll talk a little bit about what you can expect in Dutch the Magazine that's out on shelves and what's upcoming. But Tom, if you don't mind, maybe this is a very unique episode and quite an opportunity, actually, for us as listeners to the story. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about today's guest and set the stage.
Sure, let's do that. So we're in our seventh episode of Dutch the Podcast, I believe, and people may have been wondering, when are these guys going to talk about the war? Because the war, the Second World War, had a great impact on Dutch society, and it's still felt today. Well, today is that day, and we're talking to someone, a lady called Jenny van Dinter. She lives in Arizona right now, but she lived in a place that was really hit very hard during World War II in the Netherlands, because she lived in Arnhem. And now for everyone with a sense of historical memory would know Arnhem from Operation Market Garden, the movie A Bridge Too Far, the book A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan. It was a pivotal moment in World War II, and Jenny lived a stone's throw from that bridge that was the Bridge Too Far. Now, I don't want to go into the logistical and historical battlefield details. What we're focusing on today, and that is something we've done actually for a long time at Mokum Publishing, we're focusing on the ordinary people that had to live through those devastating times of war and destruction and oppression. Maybe after we speak to Jenny, I'll talk a little bit more about a project that we did in that respect, together with 200 World War II survivors from the Netherlands.
Wow.
But we'll get to that at the end of the interview. Okay. What I want to emphasize briefly is just the strategic importance of that battle,
because
and how long it raged.
This bridge really it represents a lot of what was happening in the war at that time, which was control first side of the river.
Absolutely. So what was happening? D-Day had taken place in June of 1944. The Allied forces were making great headway through France and Belgium, heading towards Northern Europe and heading, of course, eventually towards Germany to defeat Hitler and defeat the Nazis. But there were a number of battle lines they had to cross. Well, one of the biggest obstacles were the big, wide rivers that cut right through the Netherlands and divide the Netherlands in the northern and the southern portion. They had to get their armies across those rivers. Well, there's only a few bridges. If you want to move a whole army corps and whole armies across those rivers, you need the bridges intact. Yeah. So the idea was British General Montgomery said, we're going to parachute in, we're going to take the bridges, hold the bridges, and then the American forces and the Canadian forces can come up and cross those bridges and then push into Germany proper, go into the Ruhr area, which is a big industrial area, and then eventually on their way to Berlin, where they could then meet up with the Russians or on what later became the East German border. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the operation started in September of 1944, September 17th to be exact. Now, Jenny, who we'll be talking to, lived, as we said, really close to that bridge. The first bridges were taken, but the bridge at Arnhem, they had a battle, and the battle lasted for 10 days. Wow. And in those 10 days, the people of Arnhem were hiding in their basements, in their cellars, trying not to get killed as the battle was raging. Well, ultimately, unfortunately, the Allies had to withdraw. And from that point forward, Holland, for almost a year, at least through a very severe winter, was cut in two. There were people on one side of the major rivers, and the people on the other side were still under German occupation. In the south, they were liberated. In the north, they were going into one of the harshest winters in memory in the Netherlands. And I'll briefly wrap up after we talk to Jenny. What Jenny is going to be talking about as well is the fact that she was evacuated from the city after the battle. Her house had burned to the ground. Well, I shouldn't give too much away, but let's have Jenny tell their own story. But 80,000 people out of Arnhem were evacuated. 180,000 people in total were told to leave the area and to leave it basically defendable for the Germans. The Germans told them to leave. They burnt down whole city streets to make it easier to defend. The city of Arnhem was just one big pile of rubble. And in that rubble, Jenny, as a young child, 10 years old at the time, was trying to survive. Let's go to Jenny, and then we'll talk a little after. So today we're talking to Jenny van Dinter. Jenny lived in Arnhem when the Battle for Arnhem, the famous Battle for Arnhem took place. And she was a young child, of course, at the time, but she's been willing to talk to us about her experiences during the battle and also the evacuation that took place afterwards. So thank you very much, Jenny, for wanting to join us on this sixth episode of Dutch, the podcast.
Okay. The thing is, maybe it has really not much to do with it. My name is Jenny. I'm Dutch.
Oh, okay.
But you write it with a J because of the language.
I should have asked you up front. I'm so sorry, Jenny. And that's how I would say it in Dutch for sure. So I'm glad you corrected me. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Now, Jenny, let's just start straight away. Like, how old were you when the war started?
In 1944, so about we could actually say in 1940, and I was born in 1934, so I was 6 years old when the Germans started to come closer and closer and finally, moved into Holland. So
you were about 6 years old when the Germans invaded. Now, do you have any early memories of that wartime period? What's your oldest memory of life during the German occupation?
Not much more than you heard from your parents. That you always had to be careful when you saw the German soldiers, and so stay away if you could. And in the schools, they started telling us how we had to escape and what we had to do, and if it was really what 44 became.
You mean escape in case there was a battle or armed conflict or something like that?
Started to learn how the silence were, but normally in the first few years, I don't think that really changed much as a 6-year-old one or 7.
Well, as a child, of course, you don't really know. You don't know any different. Essentially, it was always there, right?
Yeah, right. And so, but when 44 came, and then I was 10, and that was a total different story.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll be getting to that in a bit. Now, I was wondering about your family background. You lived very close to the bridge across the Rhine River, right?
5 minutes.
5 minute walk from the bridge.
Right.
No, there was one other thing you told us about. You wrote a little bit of a memory of the war. Your family had a dog called King, and it disappeared at some point. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was an English bulldog, And if you look at the picture, you know, there are these big, they're very nice dogs, but when you look at them, they look kind of weird. And but that was in 44 when it really was coming closer what the Germans wanted and what they did. And my father was always walking the dog in the morning along the River Rhine there. And he came home and there was no kingy. And so we asked what happened. And my father said, well, he didn't feel good and there was something with his leg. So they took him to the vet. Well, we have never seen him anymore. And actually, when we were evacuated already, we finally heard that there were German soldiers while my father was walking and shot him dead. And because it was English blood, but the dog had.
So because it was an English breed, the German soldiers shot your family's dog?
Yes. And like I said, I heard that, you know, year later or so.
Well, your parents wanted to protect you as a child, of course, from that, I understand. Now, the other thing I think is important to know is your dad, he was a commander in the Voluntary Fire Brigade.
Yes, he was. And day and night, especially that last year, I mean, he was more out the house than in the house, of course. And we had this enormous bell hanging in the middle of the hall. You know, and the thing went always off, and then he was gone. And when the real evacuation started, he was not home either.
He was because already there were fires raging, of course. So he was away. Now, September 17th, 1944 is, of course, the day that the battle started.
Yes.
What do you remember?
That we had to go in the cellar, and we took blankets with us, and because we heard soldiers everywhere, and now the church who was behind us and the bridge who was in front of us, I mean, there was a constant shooting between those two, from the church and from the bridge. And so my mother said, you know, we go in the cellar and took blankets with us. And we were there for three days, actually.
But you would have gone into the cellar before if there was air raid sirens going off or alarms. Did you?
No, not really, because the whole house, you know, in these old houses, they even the lowest part. I mean, it's safe, you know. I mean, if nothing would fall in the house, like they used to do with the V8s, you know, they were coming into the houses. And so before that, we know there was a cellar, but it was, you know, still we played that sometimes.
Yeah. No, but so it's not like you were used to being there. This was really when the battle started that you fled into the cellar and stayed there. How many people were down there?
We were just my mother and us. There was four. And one family, our neighbor, he came with two kids as well. But after, I think, one night, he didn't think it was so safe anymore. So he left and he told us to go. But my mother didn't want to go because, you know, she was only with three kids. And she said, no, I wait until my father come back. Well, he didn't come back. And so then the house was on fire. And
your house was on fire above you?
Above us. And we heard constant things falling around. And then it was, I think, the third day that actually the Germans heard us and they pulled us out of the cellar through these iron things that you have, because we couldn't get the door open anymore. My mother tried the door from the cellar, to the kitchen, but that was blocked already. This big bowl
debris that has fallen from the house.
Yeah. So my mother was screaming from help, help, and two German soldiers who rescued us. They pulled us on our arms right up out of the cellar on the street, and they say, "Go, go!" And I mean, it was, the whole street was on fire. So we were there much longer than actually the other families, because my mother.
I read somewhere, I don't know if you know this, Jenny, that the Germans had set fire to whole blocks of houses to make space so that they could defend their positions better.
No, I think it was not that they put them on fire. I mean, there was so much shooting that it was most of the houses on the way that we took, because we were by the river Rhine and we had to go to the middle from Arnhem in the center. So that whole street was totally on fire because of the shooting that happened.
So at this point, your mother, with 3 young children, is walking through a city, a big city, 90,000 people, 100,000 people, that's on fire. There's shooting, there's a battle raging.
The part that I remember so well, that of Velperplein, that's actually the center of Arnhem, and there was my mother had a friend, and we went to that hotel from her, and that was not on fire yet, but we had to actually walk over dead bodies. I mean, soldiers and regular people. I mean, that was something that you don't forget.
You were 10 years old, and you had to cross a square that was covered with people who had been shot or dead bodies.
Or half dead even. I remember that one was reaching out, and an arm that I saw moving.
Oh my goodness!
And, I mean, that was terrible. And so
that's horrifying. Horrifying.
That hotel was she had, and we stayed there a night, and then they said Arnhem has to leave. So all the people who were also in that hotel and us, there's still no father for us. And so we moved and we went up north and to Eerbeek. They said that's safe right now.
So Jenny, just to get it clear, Arnhem is on the south side of the river. The bridge they're fighting over crosses the river, and you had to get to the other side. How did you get to the other side of the river?
We didn't go over the bridge. No, we went up north. This bridge was to the south.
Oh, the bridge was to the south. You lived on the north side of the bridge.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
So then we went to Eerbeek. That's where we stopped. And they had schools that they, made ready for the people who came out of Arnhem. And we stayed there a few days. But this hotel people, what they had taken with us was a lot of food and a lot of drinks. And all the people in the room or in the house we were in, they were, they were happy to drink some. And and we as children, we were so sad and we didn't know what to do, of course. And then my grandparents, they were, of course, older, and the Red Cross had taken them to Spakenburg. And that is a little fishing by the IJsselmeer.
Yeah, it's a fishing village on the IJsselmeer, on the big lake there. It's well known as a fishing village. And how far is this from Arnhem, approximately?
That was 68 miles.
Yeah. So you walked all that way?
No. We walked to Eerbeek, and that was 30 miles. No, kilometers.
Okay, well, 20 miles, give or take, yeah.
Yeah. That's 30 kilometers naar Eerbeek. I think we slept 2 nights in different schools that they opened up for us all.
Oh, so they opened up school because there were So thousands and thousands of people fleeing the area.
Arnhem was empty, and so everybody, I don't think that many people stayed in Arnhem in that time. And so they knew that, this whole horde of people were coming. And so they put bedding and straw and stuff in the schools so that we had a place to sleep. And then my grandparents, who were in Spakenburg, knew somebody who still had a car, and they came and picked us up out of Eerbeek. So then we went to Spakenburg.
And that would have been pretty rare because the Germans had confiscated a lot of cars.
I don't know how or what he made it, but I don't think that in that time I questioned it. I mean,
oh no, of course, no.
To see my grandparents and these villages, these houses from the fishing people, they all have a little room next to where normal people come in and undress or take your boots off or whatever. And there was a stove there, a big stove, and they let us stay there. And that was, we are talking about October. And then they said, you can stay here for a while. But in the meantime, still no father. The Germans came too close as well. So there was no food anymore. The fishing boat couldn't get out because when they went out and they came back, they immediately, the Germans were there to take the fish in. And so we were so hungry in that time. That I do remember. And
for the listeners who may not be aware of this, of course, this is the start of the hunger winter, which is known in Holland as the hunger winter. And because of the war situation, no food was coming in, or hardly any food was coming in. So the people suffered tremendously from starvation and famine.
Yes, I wrote hierin, and I never forget that whatever you could suck on. And in the meantime, our father, when we were in Spakenburg, my father showed up.
Do you remember how long after you left Arnhem he came?
Yeah, probably in November.
In November.
Yeah.
So what had happened to him in the meantime?
He was in a camp in Amersfoort.
The concentration camp in Amersfoort.
Yeah. And so, but he escaped with a friend. But again, I heard that much later.
Of course, yeah.
To talk about it. He was so skinny and bloody, and that I do remember. But then the Germans came so close by Spakenburg as well that we had to go in a big cellar. But my father, and of course maybe because of the fire brigade, I don't know, he said, this is too dangerous to stay here. He said, there are so many people in such a small area. He said, if something happens, none of us can escape here. So he took us and we started walking. Then we started walking. And then...
When was this, Jenny? What time of year was this?
January.
So in winter, because it was a cold, harsh winter from what I remember reading.
It was a good thing that we had snow to suck on. And my father cut always the pieces of his leather belt so that we could suck on it, that we had something in our mouths while we were walking. And of course, Magda, the youngest one, she was ill most of the time, so he had to carry her. And then we walked 50 miles. And because the Germans were on the top of the dikes, and so we couldn't, nobody was allowed to pass the Germans there. So we had to walk on the bottom of the dike, so close to the water. And and he said, we just keep on walking, and it was 50 miles. And then suddenly, we were so surprised that we saw jeeps and flags. And we said, oh, what is going on here? He said, well, we're elaborate, we're free. The Germans are gone. So
you'd walked across the, basically the front line.
Yeah. No, that I do, Helen. I remember that they said, oh my God, we made it. Bloody, and then the shoes was with pieces of paper then trying to walk in them.
Yes, because that's another thing, of course. Not just food was scarce, leather was scarce, clothing was scarce, everything was miserable.
You head on. And if you walk 3 days, then there is nothing left from your shoes anymore. And but that we saw these jeeps, and that it was such a.
So they were Allied soldiers in those jeeps.
Yeah,
but that's after you had spent 6 months just trying to survive.
Yeah, right. And the hunger winter, that was not only where they were liberated already in Limburg, that was the hardest part, but the tanks could not come through the soil that Holland had. They wanted to, but they all got stuck in the soil to come up to Nijmegen, Arnhem. They couldn't make it there.
Yeah, and they were stuck behind the big rivers, of course, that they couldn't cross. That was the problem. And really, if you'd only lived maybe 10, 15 miles farther south, you would have been liberated before that winter.
Right.
or if you'd been able to flee the other way.
Yeah, well, the other way is only Germany.
Yeah. No, I mean south. If you'd been able to walk south instead of north.
Yeah.
That's so one other thing so now you're liberated. The whole family is still together. Were you able to go back home?
We stayed in Apeldoorn for a few weeks, and the Red Cross took us in different houses, and my father had to go back to Arnhem earlier, and because of, he was with the fire brigade, so they let him in. And, well, because Arnhem was totally closed off. Nobody could say, I'm going to see if my house is still there. Nobody was allowed. We were free, but, nobody could go into the city because the Germans took everything what they could find. If you hear the stories with big trucks and even furniture and paintings, and they took everything what they could find in the houses too, because it is only 100 kilometers over the border. Then you're in Germany. In Germany, it's 100 miles away. So the Germans, when they were going back, they tried as much as they could do. So this whole city of Arnhem had been emptied out of people, and so before they left, the Germans looted whatever they could get their hands on and took it with them. Now, was your house still standing? No, one wall. So one wall was still there, but the rest was, was all rubble, was all.
So you lost, as a child, you lost everything. You lost all your toys. You lost everything that you'd had before that battle started.
And the school as well. The school was totally gone, and so there was nothing where you could go back to really. And then you never know if your friends were still alive, if you ever would see them again. There was even if you thought, oh yeah, we're free. It was still a very difficult time to realize what really happened, and you know.
I imagine. And when so after that, because this was the country was liberated, the whole country was liberated in May of 1945, and then I presume school started again in September.
Yeah.
Is that when you go to the same? I know the school building wasn't there, but did you go to with the same kids with the same class?
Yeah, because in that time in a place like Arnhem, you walk to school normally, so you have always the same kids out of the neighborhood, that you all walk at the same time. We had no buses. No buses.
No, you walk to school, but they would have all also been evacuated. So you'd all been in different places through the winter.
Yeah,
and you didn't go to school at all during the winter.
There was, when we were in Spakenburg, there is a little town close to Spakenburg, and it's called Bunschoten, and there was a Catholic priest, and we were Catholic, and I don't think that we often went to the church there, but he was say that the kids could come, and then he would give us books to read. That's what he did in that time. But maybe only in October, November, not more in December and January when the whole winter started. Then
I understand.
Then they had to get tulpa soup, soup made from.
Yeah, so there was a soup kitchen, but what they gave was really not very nutritional.
Tulip bulbs.
Tulip bulbs in the soup. It was the only thing you could eat.
Yeah.
But you do remember your very first real meal after the war?
Yeah, and a hot dog.
A hot dog.
when we passed the line, I told you, and then when we came to Apeldoorn and the Red Cross, and they said if you go to that and that store, the Americans have filled up with kind of bread and these sausages, what in Holland call the sausage. And it was the first thing that and those are, little things, but you remember that perfectly.
That must have tasted like cake, or...
Yeah. I can't remember. I only remember that we were so happy.
I imagine. So, of course, a lot of civilians suffered, but a lot of soldiers were killed. Mm-hmm. After the war, many soldiers, many Canadian soldiers, many American soldiers, many British, Polish soldiers were buried in and around Arnhem. Now, you played a special role in that as well.
Yeah. They asked us to, when we were back in school, and they said, well, all these graves for these soldiers, it is so, they only had a little wooden cross, there was nothing else. And so they asked if we won't accept to take care of one of those soldiers. And I did. And Magda was too young. By that time I was 10, 11, and then it was okay, but not younger kids. And so we had one, and then every other one, we can't remember how often we went there, because it is in Oosterbeek, and it's not directly in Arnhem. And even, I think, bicycles, that we went on bicycles there, and to clean the area around it and put some flowers there. And I think a year later, they asked us if we wanted to have contact with the family in England, because all those soldiers were the English parachute who came on 17th September, the 17th of September, in Arnhem. They were all dropped in Arnhem. And they were on our side of the Rhine. And they tried to swim to the left, to the other side, but they couldn't make it. So it were all English soldiers there. And so we made contact, and that woman, his widow, they was so happy to come to Holland. And we really had, for years, that we had contact with her. Even she had one child, a 3-year-old girl, and when she died, even that daughter then let us know that she passed away, and she was never married in the meantime. But
Never remarried.
We had contact with her.
You stayed in touch.
Came over, and the first time when she saw that grave, I remember that so deep, and knowing that he's in there, that was a terrible time, of course, for her. And
I imagine, yeah.
So we both had not good times, so you connect together.
Yeah, I know, I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jenny, I think this was great. Thank you so much for talking to us about this. I've got one final question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but you went through devastating experiences as a very young child. How did it affect your outlook on life, the way you look at life? How did it affect you later on?
My fear stayed for fire. I am so afraid of fire. I think that is something if you get out of a house and the flames are above you, and door the street or the whole street, and I will never don't like gas stoves. I need an electric stove, those things. If I see a gas stove, then I get scared. When I see the flames, then that is something, that has always stayed with me. But I think by the upbringing from my parents and the love we had in our house, and I don't have had really mental problems after the war. I only know it was there, and I always talked about it, and that's why people said, "Well, if you age now, why don't you write it down? Otherwise, the kids, of course, know it, but the kids should know it too." So that's why I wrote that article and I sent it to you. But,
and it's a very important story to tell, especially, there's still wars going on. There's still kids having to go through those experiences, which is terrible, of course. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much, Jenny, for wanting to share your story. I wish you all the best, and thanks again.
Okay. Hope to see you and talk to you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, there's a perspective through the eyes of a child, what wartime was like in the Netherlands, one of the most pivotal points in history. And just fascinating, Tom, and actually devastating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to remember, there were 8 million people living in the Netherlands, and Jenny's story is probably extreme, but it's not that extreme that not a lot more people went through similar circumstances. Ordinary people like you and me and our kids, and it's happening elsewhere in the world at the moment. And that's one of the most devastating things, that after that terrible experience of World War II and all the other experiences that some people still have to go through this in different places. So I'm obviously too young to have experienced the war myself. But when I grew up in the Netherlands, and this is something I'd like to share, is the war was only 15 to 20 years ago. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s in the Netherlands.
It was recent.
It was recent. You can't imagine how recent that is. That's more recent than 9/11, for example.
Exactly. And that seems indelible. Like I will never forget that in my whole life. Just one generation before you lived a horror.
And every adult in my life, from my parents to my teachers to sports coaches, they had all experienced things like Jenny was talking about. Sorry, I do it again. So when I started publishing the newspaper, the Dutch newspaper for immigrants, people said, we've got to maintain these stories, keep these stories going. And I felt, yeah, we've got to keep these stories alive, because I heard these stories from my teachers, my parents, my friends' parents, everyone, you know. And so what we did was we got, I solicited people to tell their life story, or at least their history of the war, and write it down and send it to me. Well, sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for. I got more than 200 submissions.
Oh my God.
From people. Yeah, unbelievable, right? Some of them were just, half a page, one or two anecdotes. I remember when I had to go to the soup kitchen and stand in line, and this is what happened, and that was it. Some people sent in 10, 15, 20 pages of narrative about the whole war from start to finish. Well, what I did was I collected all those stories and I published them in a series of books, 9 books in total, each about a specific theme. And one of the books, not surprising, is about Arnhem, about Market Garden, about what people went through. And it touches very close to home as well, because my mom was living in a small town just outside of Arnhem. And she describes how one evening they went to bed and there were German tanks in their street. And the next morning they woke up and they went outside to pump some water from the pump because everything had been broken down because of the war. There wasn't water and electricity and everything. And she said, there were Americans in her street, and they were liberated. They were on the right side of the rivers, but Jenny ended up on the wrong side of the river. And that was a huge difference, because that's
evacuation, starvation, displacement.
Yeah, exactly. And also the people who, unlike Jenny, were not evacuated and were not staying with strangers, even if they stayed in their own homes. The Germans had cut off all food supplies. Rations were down to, figure this, 400 calories a day.
Oh my God. It seems impossible that you could live any period of time on that few calories.
Well, and that's, of course, the sad thing. People couldn't. So, and even if they had the ration, they could not always get the food.
I was going to say they were augmenting what they couldn't even get with tulip bulbs and roots and
exactly
many things you wouldn't eat today.
And there was a famine, literally a famine, and more than 20,000 people died in the cities of Amsterdam, The Hague, in the western part of the Netherlands. The people that didn't have access to farms and food like that. A lot of them went out in the harsh, cold of winter, walking on shoes that had not been fixed for 4.5, 5 years. Clothes that were totally insufficient for what they were doing. They didn't have transportations. They didn't have bicycles. They just walked and went to farmers and begged for some help. And that's why people talked about it so much when I was a kid. It was just such an emotional and deeply disturbing experience that they went through. There's even fallout in the next generation. Kids that were born in 1945 from mothers who lived through the hunger winter is what we call it in Holland,
right,
have a higher risk of a whole number of diseases, including diabetes, obesity, mental illness. These were kids that weren't even born, but were gestating during that winter. Anyway, we could probably talk about this for many, many episodes of the podcast, and we'll bring on other guests who can talk about this for sure.
That sounds like a great idea, Tom, because frankly, it is fascinating to put a perspective on the Netherlands through the eyes of, as you say, just a very short time ago, the focus was survival during one of the most horrific times in the history of civilization. And so on that note, I'm sure that has had impact on almost everything in the Netherlands, and I'm sure it will come up again.
And it's also, Mike, one of the reasons that the Dutch love the Canadians so, because the Canadian soldiers played such a pivotal role in the liberation of the Netherlands, and they are remembered and revered for that still.
Good stuff, Canada. Well done. Spoken as a good old Canadian boy. definitely you feel that love when you go to the Netherlands. Everywhere that I went in the Netherlands, to know that you were Canadian was a delight to the people that you met. So,
well, maybe this episode put that in perspective for you a little bit. Now you understand why.
I really do. What a devastating time, and to know that Canada played a part in providing some relief during those times does make me proud. There's no two ways about that.
And rightfully so.
All right, now listen. Before we wrap up, I will tell you this: our delightful host Tom has written an amazing book. There is a book that we want to talk about today as well, but I'll start with yours, Tom. Please check out Riding in Plain Bike. Sorry, what is the name of the book again?
Hiding in Plain Sight, Bike.
That's what I said. I think that's what I said.
That's what you said, yeah, for sure.
Which is a really amazing book about Dutch life here in North America, how it's extended itself into many fascinating facets of our life that are hiding in plain sight. Also, another book that we wanted to plug today, Tom.
Yeah, I just mentioned it, right? It's the book series about World War II with the memories of 200 people who survived the war. In particular, I'd like to point if this episode really resonated with you, Caught in the Crossfire. It's number 7 in the series, but they can be purchased separately and they can be read separately. They're all individual stories. Together, they build a whole picture of the occupation in the Netherlands, but every single book, we have one about the Holocaust, we have one about resistance, we have one about the Hunger Winter, of course, we have one about liberation. Every one of those books collects a number of stories, anywhere from 15 to 30 or 40 memories of the wartime in the Netherlands.
You'll find them at DutchTheMedia.com, which, by the way, is where you can reach out to us as well. And we would encourage your comments and stories and ideas for future podcasts. And I think with that, we wrap up another one. Thanks, Tom.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. It was a very interesting episode.
Listen, thanks so much for lining Jenny up today. That was fascinating. And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Okay. See you next time.